In 1660, there was a crazy Dutch scientist called Anton van Leeuwenhoek, and the man was completely and utterly mad. Because he spent 10 years of his life writing scientific papers about how he saw small things moving around in water. And clearly he was mad because if you look at water, and even if we really squint, we can't see anything moving. Sir Isaac Newton was one of the founders of the Royal Society of London. And one of their first ever road trips was to visit this crazy, mad scientist in his laboratory in Delft. And when they went there, they realized that this man had invented the microscope. The small things had always been there. We as human beings had lacked the eyes, had lacked the lens to see those things. What I have been doing is I've been pioneering the human microscope to understand how this crazy sort of human world that we live in actually works, and then not only to combine these sciences together, but then to actually apply them to doing interesting things. My goal fundamentally is to change the world, and I'll be telling you about some of the sciences and about a practical application of this, which will be in 2011, how do you bring down dictatorships? I used to be an entirely normal person. I was the CEO of a very successful software company. I pioneered crowdsourcing and collective intelligence for large corporations. My life entirely changed in mid-2007 because I was given an invitation by the World Economic Forum, who do the Davos people, that I would go to the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer. This, for me, was a lifetime's ambition. This was amazing. I actually did a little bit of a dance. It was very good. Actually, bad dance, but it was by myself. What I then realized, though, is that I was kind of bored of myself. It's all very well being a CEO of a successful software company, but I just was kind of bored. So I decided that if I could get whatever I wanted, and doing Davos was one of those things, that I should try to ask for something bigger, something much more interesting. Because I remembered that when I was 7 years old, I always wanted to change the entire world for better. Ideally, without anybody knowing that it was me. So I'm a pragmatist, I'm a strategist, I'm a practical, idealist person, and I then worked out, well, okay, if I can get whatever I want, then I need to have a plan to do it. Now, by the way, would anybody here like to get whatever they want? Within reason. Would you like to know how? So it's very easy. First thing, work out what it is that you want. And by the way, if you don't know what you want, that can be the thing that you want. I'd like to know what I want. The next thing is give yourself a time frame. It's not absolutely essential. It can create stress, cortisol in the brain to make you very upset. But having a time frame is not bad. But the third and the most important thing is tell as many people as possible. Because it turns out that it's telling as many people as possible that shows pretty much how my world, the world of the human microscope, the science of spread, is very, very spooky and weird, but how my world is much more right than your world. And the answer to this can be shown in a single question. If there are 30 people in a room, what is the percentage likelihood that 2 or more people share a birthday? Now, some of you might be thinking 10%, 5%, 50% is also good. Now, all of those people that think that it's 5 or 10% are completely and utterly wrong. Even 50% is off by a little bit. The actual number is 71%. And I can explain why. So my birthday is the 3rd of March. Anybody here 3rd of March? You could be like, say, 25th of January, 20th of September. So you can have different dates. What is interesting then is that in our heads we're egotistical. We think that the answer to the mathematics is what are the odds of somebody matching my day and month? It's the wrong mathematics. This is an additive mathematics. This is mathematics where the numbers go up, they do not go down. And this then begins to go into the world of abundance. And in the world of abundance, of massively large numbers, the world is much more spooky. And it pretty much allows us to take away some of the constraints, the scarcities that we have to start looking at the world in a fundamentally new way. So I remember being 7 years old and I wanted to change the entire world for better. The thing is that I'm a pragmatist. I mean, I've taken a company public, I've employed lots of people. I'm not an idealist. So as soon as I decided that I was going to go to Davos in 2008, and this was my life's ambition, I had to come up with a plan. So I decided to get some books out. Now at this point you might be thinking Siddhartha. You might be thinking sort of esoteric, Eastern fiction. You might even be thinking of The Secret. Not me. I'm a behavioral scientist. I mean, I work on social sciences. So rather than looking at whatever sort of crazy, funky, strange things, I liked coming up with something called the science of spread. So the books that I got were around complex systems. They're around emergence and emergent behavior. They're around heuristics, simple rules. They're around network science, network thinking. Behavioral science, what goes on inside of our heads. Collective intelligence, how we work together as massive amounts of people. Contagion, and also abundance. What I was doing was I was trying to stitch together a set of different, very often diverse sciences to combine them together. And then afterwards, we'll see about how we can apply them. Now, we don't have time to go through everything in depth, so I'm just going to pick out a few highlights. Complex systems. This room is a complex system, so we'll keep it human being for now rather than air molecules and other things. Inside of a complex system, let's say as a human beings, we're defined by 2 or more people with a state memory, so we remember what we just did, and we are interacting. We see, we give off signals, and as soon as that happens, the world becomes complex. Now, this complexity means that it is nonlinear, it is dynamic, it is not as though A follows B. These are sort of very, very strange things happening. But what's really weird if you look at a complex system is patterns begin to emerge. This room is a very weird place because right now you have a very large number of people all doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. How many here had an instruction manual on how to use the room? The patterns emerge. Now, the reason why patterns begin to emerge is because of heuristics. Within all complex systems, we pretty much not only have a state memory, but we have a pattern recognition system and we have a set of simple rules. Human being rules can be things like, if in doubt, go for the one you know. They can be, keep doing what you're doing until there is a compelling reason to change. Follow your peers. Those 3 simple rules can pretty much allow you to understand about 70% of all human behavior. People go follow stuff. Well, as soon as you have these heuristics now, we have an understanding of complex systems and how they work. But what's interesting then is that if we look at the previous discussion was around small networks, small worlds. What's very interesting with networks and network science is that provides a layer on top of complex systems. These things should be combined together. They should not be separate. And as soon as you start thinking in terms of networks, you get some very interesting effects. And I'll be giving an example very soon in terms of bringing down dictatorships of a tactical pre-existing networks. Behavioral science is also very important. This pretty much looks at the funky, crazy human beings that we are, being predictably irrational. So behavioral science also goes in part of the plan of how do you change the world. And the last part that I'll pick out is contagion. How does one thing lead to another? How do you have the Arab Spring spring out from nowhere? In 2011, you had the UK riots, 4 days of rioting in Great Britain for practically no reason whatsoever. So pretty much, how does things spread? What's interesting for me then is that I was really doing this thing to give myself a new lens, a human microscope, using the science of spread to allow me to understand what was going on. So the first thing is, how do you understand this crazy systems that we live in? Next thing will be, how do you predict? How do you work out what will happen next? And then the final thing is, how do you design? How do you design programs to make change? So, back to Davos, 2008, this was my chance. I met a guy on a shuttle bus at Davos, and he said, look, I'm a politician, I'm an opposition politician from Zimbabwe. I'm fighting an election in 5 weeks' time. I have no money, and I can't tell anyone what I'm doing. Can you defeat a dictator in a corrupt election? Absolutely, it's all easy. Robert Mugabe lost the election by 50.4%. We invented, in 45 minutes of discussion in Davos, crowdsourced election monitoring. The idea was we had 1,000 people with camera phones standing outside the polling stations taking pictures of the local election results, uploading those pictures instantly to a website in South Africa where 10 people crowdsourced and turned the pictures into a giant spreadsheet. And within just a few hours, we'd counted millions of votes and were able to tell the world press that Mugabe had lost the election with physical evidence. Let's go back to network thinking. The reason that that worked is we tapped into pre-existing networks of people that already had camera phones. 15,000 supporters of the political party were activated to go and take these pictures. That was pretty cool. What's interesting, though, is that if you can do it once, you can do it again. So I'm going to tell you about Libya. So in Libya in 2011, I was one of a group of civilian activists doing some remarkable crazy, almost sort of incomprehensible things around the Libyan revolution. For example, there was the first 2 aid boats into Misrata, while it was a full-on war zone, was not organized by the United Nations. It was not organized by the Red Cross or the Red Crescent. It was organized by a group of civilians tied together with Global Relief Libya to help get the first 2 aid boats into Misrata. The first international journalist into Misrata while it was a full-on war zone was Fred Pleitkin. His wife, Justina, a Polish woman, was very, very angry with me because I got her husband into a war zone. Oops. How did this thing even happen? Well, at the beginning of February, I was contacted by a woman called Stephanie Lamy. Stephanie Lamy is a woman, a single mother with 2 children. She used to work in Prada, so she used to sell very, very expensive handbags to mistresses of rich business people. She had lost her job and became doing social media, and she's extremely good at social media, and she was doing social media for restaurants. She came across websites, the Feb 17 livestream website, where a whole bunch of Libyans were talking about revolution, and she pretty much started helping the revolutionaries. She heard about my Zimbabwe story, and we started working together. We did crazy stuff. This, by the way, is me sitting in Libya in December. The front end of revolution is pretty much how do you get rid of the nasty people. The back end is how do you try to fix things. And I was there for transparency conferences and also to help the non-profits and NGOs ensure fair elections. I'm going to give one sort of final story about how do we apply the science of spread then to solving a problem, and this will stay with the Libyan one. And this is the Libyan loan story. The Libyan rebels had run out of cash. This was in around April of last year. They had no money. And if you're rebels and a revolution and you have no cash, you can't afford wages, you can't buy gasoline, you get killed. It happens almost instantly. The Libyan rebels, the Libyan sort of finance group of the National Transitional Council, had gone to Italy to ask the Italians to borrow money. And of course the Italians said, not a chance in hell. Well, now this is Stephanie and I, so I'm on a bus in Berlin, I live in Berlin. And on this bus in Berlin, Stephanie is there, she's got her kids running around, she's sitting in Paris. And we decide that we will help the Libyans get a 200 million euro loan from the Italians. Now, by the way, we don't speak Arabic. We're not Libyan. At the time, we'd never even been there beforehand. We're just pretty much interested individuals who've decided to actually do something instead of just talking about it. So we work out this is actually quite easy. So this is a 10-minute conversation. We work out that fundamentally we have to understand how do we change the minds of a small number of people, those being the bankers in Italy. To do that, we needed to have transparency, and we needed to have the power of mass public opinion. And what we ended up with was a leak. Through our network, and we had a network of doctors and other things, I received into my inbox, my Yahoo mailbox, a leak, a 19-page PowerPoint document prepared by for the Libyan Investment Authority by KPMG. This leak contained every single bank account, stock, trade, everything. Well, with this leak, I then worked with a group called Global Witness. Global Witness then shared this to the international press. Within 1 week, it was in 200 headline newspapers around the world, including every single one in Italy, apart from the sports papers. And 1 week later, the Italians give a multi-million-dollar loan to the Libyan rebels in the middle of a war zone. What's interesting is that B very rarely follows A. This is a complex, non-linear, dynamic world. But yet sometimes the timing works out. Sometimes by applying these rules, things do actually work out. Even if the stories sound completely crazy, these things do happen. The human microscope and the science of spread. By using this new way of looking at the world, by combining sciences that already exist, that quite often a lot of us already know, but just combining and moving them together, we can start to apply them to doing things to make the world better, because fundamentally what this human microscope allows us to do is understand how the world is working. It then allows us to predict what is likely to happen next. And then, if we don't like the outcomes of what is likely to happen next, then you can fundamentally design programs to help make change. And with that, we can help the world of business, but then fundamentally we can also help make the world a better place. With that, thank you very much. Thank you.